Hi, this is Brad Warner with Region Weather Live, your live streaming platform for weather across the Dakotas and Minnesota. We're going to take a look right away at the weather that's been affecting our region today. As you can see, we've been dealing with quite a bit of wind. These are the wind gusts that are plotted on there, the numbers, along with the radar overlaid. But boy, we had wind gusts 45 to 55 miles per hour across much of the Dakotas, with some wind gusts getting up to 60 to 61 miles per hour actually in Huron. Down around Jamestown, I think some areas got around 58 miles per hour. Rapid City down here, you can see as you follow that along, got all the way up to 64 miles per hour at one point. So as we go into the evening hours, a lot of these gusts are starting to die off, and that's pretty typical just because as we lose the daytime heating, the winds from the upper levels stop mixing down to the ground level. So all the stronger winds up top don't quite make it down to the surface anymore. So we do lose some of the wind gusts, but they're still expected to remain fairly strong overnight, and then pick up once again in the morning. Take a look at the Duluth radar. You can see plenty of moisture still being wrapped around this system and affecting much of the area across northeastern parts of Minnesota. Some areas up here along the North Shore got anywhere from 9 to 13 inches of snow overnight last night, Tuesday night, and through the day on Wednesday. Some of this now is kind of falling as a rain-snow mix. It looks like we were getting a little bit more warmer air kind of get entrenched in there a little bit, but I would expect as the night goes along, Wednesday night, we're going to get more cold air being brought in on the north side. So a lot of this is going to turn back over to snow as we go through the night, Wednesday night. As we flip on over to the Mayville radar here across the valley region of North Dakota and northwestern Minnesota, you can see a pretty good band of snow rotating counterclockwise through the region. Now, most of this is falling as snow, with the exception down on the far south. Looks like they are still picking up a little bit of rain, but again, as we get more and more of this colder air driven in from the north overnight, temperatures begin to drop. This will all turn over to snow as we go into the nighttime hours Wednesday night. As we go into the nighttime hours here Wednesday night, and the temperatures begin to drop, I think some of the snow that's going to occur will probably stick to the ground, and so some areas, some grassy areas out there, could very well pick up anywhere from 1 to maybe even up to 4 inches of snow. And I would also think that once you get into the early morning hours with temperatures dropping off, that some of these roadways could also turn rather slippery. And here you can see the wind gusts, and we're right around that 8-9 a.m. time frame for Thursday morning. And you can see with the yellows, most of these areas are going to pick back up into the 40s to possibly 50 mile per hour range as far as the wind gusts go. So anywhere that is still snowing, especially in that early morning hours, could blow around a little bit, might have some reduced visibilities. It's going to be kind of hit and miss, and it just depends on how heavy it snows. I don't think it's going to be a very prolonged area or a very large area, but there might be some areas here and there throughout the morning that might have some lower visibilities due to the winds and the snow as well. Thankfully, once we get to Thursday around noon, a lot of this snow starts to taper off, and the system finally begins to very slowly pull away, starts to run out of some of that moisture. So really all that's going to be left by the Thursday evening time frame after about 6-7 o'clock is going to be some lighter snow out and through eastern parts of Minnesota. So much of that really is decreasing through the overnight hours Thursday night into early Friday morning. And all we're left with is probably a little bit of wind gusts left over into the early nighttime hours. As you can see here, by 6 p.m. Thursday evening, some of those winds start to die off a little bit and then really start to decrease into the overnight hours Thursday night and into Friday morning. So conditions are going to be improving as this low finally moves away. Friday looks to be a better day once those wind gusts move on out. And then some high pressure begins to move in. We get a little bit of a return, a southerly flow out in the western parts of the Dakotas. So it actually doesn't look like Friday, excuse me, should be too bad of a day for those of you out in the western parts of North and South Dakota. We're going to be a little cooler here in the eastern Dakotas and through Minnesota, just because we're still going to be feeling the effects of that low pressure system that's going to be finally moving on out. Snowfall amounts expected from Wednesday evening into Thursday evening. You can see kind of in that 1 to 3 inch range of northwestern Minnesota. In the Sisseton Hills area, looking like probably in that 2 to 4 range possible. But otherwise, most areas in through eastern Dakotas and western Minnesota up through the north, probably in that 1 to 3 inch range, and even across the Arrowhead region of Minnesota. Now, again, a good chunk of this will very likely melt, at least on the roadways. Some will accumulate on the snow. I know as I looked outside the east this evening in our place, the snow is beginning to accumulate on the grassy areas. So roads shouldn't be too bad, except for, again, some localized spots. But just be mindful that some of this, while we could pick up 3-4 inches of snow, you might look out and go, well, no, we didn't. Well, we probably did. It just melted. That's ultimately the problem. It's just a matter of how we go about measuring the snow is the difference. All right, we moved that storm system on out of there. We got rid of the winds. We've measured all the snow. What's next? Well, for Friday, we begin to build this ridge over us. And you can see, as we've talked about a little bit ago, that the western parts of the Dakotas probably should start to warm up fairly nicely as that ridge begins to develop in through the western Dakotas on Friday. As we get into Friday night and into Saturday, it pushes a little bit further east, so it looks like Saturday should be a pretty nice day across the entire region. Not looking for any type of precip, some pretty nice temperatures. But then here we can see out in the west, another system begins to develop. Some cooler air begins to move on in Saturday night and into Sunday. And that'll be bringing our next little weather maker in through the region for Sunday. Now, by Saturday evening, you can see it looks like we almost have a 2 different areas or a split flow type of scenario in a way, because we've got some of the precip a little bit further south with this low pressure system, and then we've got another one further north. So our region kind of stays out of the precip Saturday night until you kind of get into the very early morning hours of Sunday morning, when the rain starts to make its way into central parts of South Dakota, and then eventually moves into the eastern parts of North and South Dakota. Once some of that moisture gets further north, it kind of runs into some of that cooler air and turns over to snow once it gets into the northern parts of Minnesota. So it looks like we'll be picking up some accumulating snow there Sunday morning. And it does linger a little bit into Sunday afternoon and the early parts of Sunday evening. Now, as we get into the day Sunday, probably very likely as the day warms up some of this will turn into a rain or rain-snow mix. And the other thing is whatever does kind of form in there later in the day probably really won't stick. Maybe that very early bit of snowfall that occurs earlier in the morning could stick around a little bit more if the temperatures are a little bit cooler, but I think as the day goes along, accumulations will remain light. Now, you kind of notice as we move this along, we kind of get these a little bit of disturbances that are kind of on the backside of this. So you might get some rain and snow mix and possibly some accumulations across the Black Hills as we get into Monday morning. But eventually, it kind of leads into this next system that we've been talking about here for the last couple of days. This is Tuesday morning, and here's this big low that's sitting coming out of Colorado, and the one that we've been talking about here for the last couple of days and wondering where that's going to be going. Now, you can see this particular model really wants to bring in the rain and the snow across much of South Dakota and Minnesota, kind of leaves the western parts of North Dakota alone before it moves off into the Great Lakes and brings a fair amount of snow across central parts of Minnesota. Again, this is right now, this is the Wednesday night time frame as I back it up. This is Wednesday late afternoon. Now, this is just one particular model. The other thing I've been noticing here is some of the ensembles are actually taking this a little bit further south. Here is one of the ensembles, and basically what this does is take various models and kind of meshes it together. And where it has the lows is basically the average location of where several models think the lows will be. And then the numbers that you see associated with it is where some of the models think the center of the low will be. So basically, I mean, you can kind of tell here as this low pressure system is kind of right in between all these numbers here. So that's basically what it's looking at. Now, this is Tuesday evening into Tuesday night around midnight. You can see the ensemble brings out that low into the central and southern plains, and then eventually moves it out into the Great Lakes region. So you can see kind of the smattering of numbers out here. They're kind of all over the place. So what that's telling me right now is the models really don't have a real great grasp onto how exactly this is going to move along. One thing, as I've said before, that I have noticed is that the trend seems to be that this system is pushing a little bit further south and east and missing much of northwestern parts and even central parts of North Dakota. So as I look at this right now, if I were to draw probably some snow, I'd probably, put a pretty good area of snow right in through there. But that all remains to be seen. We'll see how that pans out once this moves along. Probably the other thing to note as we move into the mid to later parts of next week is we're still kind of sitting in this trophy cool goodness throughout the week. So probably looking at temperatures a little bit below seasonal. Probably shouldn't be too bad, but just note that probably the best thing that this is indicating is that temperatures might not be as warm as they probably should be at this time of year. Well, that's all I really have for you today. So Thursday continued to be windy out there, along with the continued snow in some spotty areas, some accumulations out there as well. But the winds and the snow expected to taper off Thursday evening, and then more so Thursday night, with Friday and Saturday having a bit of a warm-up in store. So, all right, everybody, thank you for joining me. As always, go ahead, as I always say, hit the like and subscribe button. Please hit that. The more you do that, the more you hit subscribe and share, the better this channel does, and the more we can get this information out to people across the region. And boy, that would be just fantastic. I'm really shooting for 1,000 followers at some point by the end of this year. Got a long way to go, but hopefully we'll get there. So thank you, everybody, for tuning in. This is Brad Warner. Have a good one.